Hello, this is Miss Clark. I am reading chapter 6 today of Standing Against the Wind. And today, when you are finished with reading chapter 6, you will make a connection, either a text to text connection where something in the story has reminded you of another story. You will make a text to world connection. Something in the story is reminding you of something that happens in the real world, or you can make a text to self connection. So, something in the story is reminding you of something that you have also experienced. Now, when you make your connection, it can be all the way through chapters 1 through 6. It does not have to just be on chapter 6. The rest of the week went by quickly, or so it seemed to Patrice. With only Tuesday and Thursday free, Patrice was suddenly busier than ever. That Wednesday, Monty and Michael had come right on time as usual. Both had brought their homework. Surprisingly, the same thing happened on Friday. Patrice was stunned to see that Monty had brought homework. After all, it was the start of the weekend. Even she didn't do much on Fridays. Your math teacher gave you homework on a Friday? Asked Patrice. She usually just did some reading. She had given Mike a little work to do, and he had sailed through it. Now he, Mark Anthony, and Nefertiti were in the middle of a game of Uno. Monty grinned as he looked up from his math book. I might be a little behind on my homework. Patrice smiled back. Okay, how behind? Monty let out a guffaw. About 3 months. Patrice gasped. The thought of being that far behind made her queasy. No way. Monty grinned again and shrugged. This stuff is easy. I'll be caught up in no time. After watching the way Monty whipped through the problems, each one nice and neat and correct, she didn't doubt it. Michael is just as smart as you are, she observed, more to herself than to Monty. She wondered why Monty wasn't in the accelerated classes with her. Monty stopped his work and looked up. As usual, Patrice squirmed and looked away. Her stomach felt funny. I ain't smart, Monty replied at last. He sounded almost angry. Patrice frowned slightly. Based on how quickly he could do the math, it seemed to Patrice that he was very smart. He just didn't really care about school. Yes, you are, Patrice said, firmly, looking directly back at him. You don't bother to do your work, that's all. It's like you don't care about it. Monty returned her gaze. He appeared to be thinking about her comment. Then he shrugged. Yeah, well, I ain't as smart as you are, he finally answered. This time it was Patrice who grinned. Yes, well, all of us can't be geniuses. Monty laughed. You think you're all that, huh? Patrice laughed at the very thought. Hardly, she said between giggles. I'm not even half of that. She looked at Monty, expecting him to laugh with her, but he was gazing at her in the same old way, and she stopped giggling. He smiled at her, shook his head, and said, No, Patrice, you are all that. Startled by the compliment, Patrice murmured a soft, thanks, and retreated into the kitchen. Monty got up and moved his work to the kitchen table while the kids started yet another game of Uno in the living room, and Patrice began dinner. She was standing at the stove trying to figure out whether to invite Monty and Michael to dinner or to make extra and then invite them to dinner, using the excuse of extra food when the door flew open and in swooped Cherise, the force of nature. Right away, she noticed Monty. Well, who might this handsome young man be? She asked Patrice, her voice full of mirth and her eyebrows raised. Now, notice how I do the two voices different. I try to show Patrice's shyness. I really try to quiet my voice down. And then whoosh, When Charisse walks in, I try to make it a wind, a force of nature, a rudeness, an extroverted personality, a confidence that Charisse just naturally has in her. That's what that expression means, force of nature. Right away. Sorry, I read that. Monty got up from the table and offered his hand. Monty Freeman, you must be Patrice's sister. Y'all resemble. Patrice felt a surge of anger at her sister. She was still upset about Monday. She had tried to call Charisse at work on Tuesday, but each time Charisse had been busy with a client, which had annoyed Patrice so much that she decided to just live with her poof of hair forever, rather than hunt down her sister and beg for an hour or so of her precious time. Patrice was just as mad at herself for counting on Charisse. She should have known better. You hear that, Treese? Hooted Charisse, coming up to Patrice and giving her a big hug, not noticing that Patrice didn't bother to hug her back. Your boyfriend think we look alike. Boyfriend? Oh, jeez. Patrice felt her face get hot. Why can't Charisse shut up? Now notice the italics here. These are Patrice's inner thoughts. It's an inner dialogue she's having with herself. Charisse, Monty's not, began Patrice, but Monty interrupted her. You work at the Cuttin' Style, right? He asked. Shoot, I work like a dog at the Cuttin' Style, but I ain't never seen you up there. What you know about that place? Said Charisse, making herself comfortable at the kitchen table after fixing a tall glass of iced tea. That's where my mom gets her hair done, he answered. Patrice sighed and returned to the cooking. Who your mama? Asked Charisse, taking off her high-heeled shoes and moaning with relief. Deborah Clark, Monty replied, in a voice that caused Patrice to turn and look at him. Oh, said Charisse. Really? Monty simply nodded. What you cooking? Charisse asked Patrice, obviously changing the subject. She poured herself a second glass of iced tea and then set one down in front of Monty. Patrice, is your boyfriend staying for dinner? Again, Patrice's face got hot. No, he's not. You can't stay for dinner? Charisse interrupted, turning to Monty. Now, notice the dash here, the interruption. Patrice is talking, and then Charisse just, whoosh, force of nature that she is, talks right over Patrice, and she's going to be the one I'm predicting that's going to ask Monty to stay for dinner. Well, she kind of does. You can't stay for dinner? That's her way of inviting him. Sure I can, replied Monty. Patrice saw the familiar smirk creep across his face. See? Patrice, he can stay for dinner, said Charisse, smiling down at Monty. He just said so. No, I meant he's not my, started Patrice, and this time Monty interrupted her. Charisse, have you met my little brother? He'll love you. Hey, I like me some younger men, and seeing as my sister already got you snatched up, let's meet the little man. Bet he look as good as you. Charisse laughed, flirtatiously grabbing hold of Monty's arm and making him escort her out of the kitchen. Patrice heard them in the living room, demanding that they be included in the latest Uno game. She shook her head. He's not my boyfriend, she muttered, but only the hamburger patties were around to hear her. Now, I giggled there a little bit. In my own mind, I'm making a text-to-world connection. It's like a text-to-world and a text-to-self connection about siblings, being an embarrassment. Often they don't have any shame sometimes to make us look silly in front of people we might be wanting to impress, which is really Even though they're comfortable now together, Patrice and Monty, look at how Charisse has a way of really making her uncomfortable around Monty by pushing the boyfriend issue. So I think anybody, the text to world connection is anybody who has a sibling can comprehend the way that siblings are able to make us feel uncomfortable around our friends. Patrice never bothered to ask Charisse about her hair that night. It was too hectic. She finished making dinner. Everyone ate, and then they all played a couple more games of Uno. Charisse excused herself, got into the shower, came out looking even more beautiful than usual, and left carrying a huge overnight bag. Patrice figured she wouldn't see her again until the end of the week. Monty and Michael left shortly afterward. Patrice figured it was because the life of the party, Charisse, had gone. Patrice cleaned up the kitchen and got Mark Anthony and Nefertiti bathed and in bed. She had planned to curl up under her covers and read some, but the next thing she knew, it was Saturday morning. It was much later than she wanted to get up, so by the time she finished her chores and got to the library, it was already past noon. She walked through the book racks to her hidden desk and was surprised to see Monty sitting there, his homework spread out. "Hey," she said, speaking much too loudly. "Hey yourself," he answered, leaning back in the chair. "You're late." Late? Late for what? She sat down her book bag and rubbed her hands together, trying to warm them. "I thought you got here when it opened," he replied, taking her cold hands into his warm ones and rubbing them. She was so distracted by his gesture, she didn't answer him. She could only stare at their hands, feeling the warmth return to hers. "You still working on that application?" he asked, dropping her hands and gathering up his books and papers. She muttered, still distracted. "Is that a yes or a no?" he asked, definitely smirking at her now. "Yeah, I got 2 essays I still have to do," she answered, watching him pick up all of his things. "You don't have to move. There's another desk a few rows over by the window. I can work there." Monty shook his head and pointed to a large, empty table that sat in the middle of the room. "Why don't we move there?" he asked. "We?" "Yeah, you. And me? We?" You what? You want to be alone or something?" Monty asked. Patrice thought she heard disappointment in his voice. "It's you and I." "Why don't you and I move over there?" she said. Monty shook his head. "You are something else, Patrice," he laughed. "Shoot, if I keep hanging out with you, I'll be speaking all proper and stuff, and I'll lose my ghetto membership card. Come on." He grabbed her book bag and led her to the table. As he settled down, carefully arranging his stuff, Patrice pulled out her application. She went over everything and then stopped at the parental section and made a mental note to bottle her pride and beg Charisse to drive her to Mount Rose the day after tomorrow. It was Martin Luther King Day and she was out of school. Now, which essay did she do first? Now, here's this internal dialogue she's having with herself. She's not saying this out loud because notice there's no quotes around that. Now, which essay should she do first? Deciding on the historical one, she gazed out the window and tried to think of an appropriate figure or event to cover. And suddenly she noticed that Monty had stopped working and was watching her as she chewed her bottom lip. "You all right?" he finally asked. "Huh?" she mumbled, pulling herself out of her reverie or her deep thought. Yeah, I'm okay, just thinking." "What are you thinking about?" "Oh, what to write this essay on," she said, shoving the instructions over for him to read. He looked at them. "What about King?" "Nah, too expected," she said. "Malcolm X?" "Nah, too radical. I was thinking maybe of a woman or someone who was an educator. A woman. Monty sounded incredulous. Like who? Harriet Tubman? Why do you sound so stunned? I was thinking about Mary McLeod Bethune or someone like that. Mary McWhat who? Said Monty, leaning back in his chair, looking like his casual self. Mary McLeod Bethune. She founded Bethune Cookman College. She was one of like 17 children of former slaves, and she advised presidents on child welfare and education and stuff like that. Monty looked interested, and that was enough for Patrice. She went to the history section of the library and came back with an armful of books. After showing Monty a few of them, she could tell she had his tacit approval. Feeling buoyed, she went to work. I love these word choices here. She had his tacit approval, and she was feeling buoyed. Buoyed. I said buoyed first, but it's buoyed. Buoyed. She's lifted up by his approval. And he doesn't come out and say, I approve. But just the look on his face is a tacit approval. It's a hint of approval. And that lifts her up. So she just gets right into her essay, her historical essay on this non-fictional individual. And you could even Google Mary McLeod Bethune to find out a little bit about how much influence she really did have on African American rights. For the rest of the afternoon, they worked in companionable silence. Another really great word choice, companionable. They are now, by chapter 6, companions, homework companions, and for him, a hand-warming companion. Hint, hint. Patrice finished 2 drafts of her essay and felt that all she needed was a little time in the school's computer room to polish and print it. And true to his word, Monty caught up on his math homework. Even though she had spent it working, this had been one of Patrice's best days since moving to Chicago, and Monty looked pleased too. It was dusk when they walked home. Look at that. They got there at noontime, and now it's dusk when they're walking home. So the sun is just starting to set. Opening the door to the apartment, Patrice found that Auntie May had had enough energy to cook and had started making dinner. On the way to her bedroom, she glanced into the bathroom and saw a huge container of relaxer cream next to an even bigger bottle of conditioner. Patrice, Cherise said, to be home tomorrow after church. 'Cause that's when she's going to do your retouch, said Nefertiti, skipping past. She said she's also going to do something to my head. Yes, whispered Patrice, running her hand across her puffy ponytail. Yes, indeed. This has been a very good day. So stop here, make a text to text, a text to world, or a text to self connection. And the question will be at the top of the stream. I cannot wait to see how you are connecting to one of my favorite young adult fictional novels, Standing Against the Wind by Tracy L. Jones. Thank you for reading along with me, and I look forward to reading to you again. Have a great day.